that lovely introduction. It's very embarrassing. You don't get introduced at home when you come and find yourself being introduced to everybody once again. So it's with great joy that I am here to speak on a subject that I love, which is the history of Chennai. Mr. Madhu and I agreed that I'll speak on glimpses of Chennai history. It's very difficult to give a comprehensive account of the city's history in the time that is usually given in a Rotary meeting. The first thing is that as a city, we are very fortunate and we have also been very unfortunate. And it's a wonder that we have actually grown to this extent as a metropolis, because there is a lot there has been a lot working against a city like this developing geographically, historically, and there are several factors that would have actually prevented the city from reaching the status that it has. And if at all it has reached this level, it is entirely, as in all cities, it is entirely because of the people. Because you see, Chennai as a city doesn't present you with much of natural advantages. There is no real great river. People keep talking about restoring the Adyar and the Buckingham Canal is a man-made creation. But the thing is that we don't have a permanent river. Secondly, we never had a natural harbour. This is not a natural harbour for ships to come and stop. So historically, this would have never been a place where empires would have grown and flourished. So if you look at it that way, and the weather, as you know, could have been a lot better. It's just that it is not. So and it is really not in the geographical centre of the state that it represents. If you look at Calcutta, which is a Bengali city in Bengal, Bombay, which is a Maharashtrian city in Maharashtra, with of course a lot of other people coming in over the period. But Madras is not so. It is almost in Andhra Pradesh. It was historically a Telugu-speaking city, which was appropriated by the Tamils and then became a part of Tamil Nadu, and it's at the northernmost tip of Tamil Nadu. If you look at it, the rest of the state is far down below. Despite all this, and during the British Empire for the first 150 years, in the early years it was the capital, then Calcutta became the capital, and then till the 1920s, Madras was always a neglected city, because Bombay and Calcutta and Colombo, these were the three favoured cities as far as the British Empire was concerned. Nobody was interested in developing this as a city. Despite all that, it grew, and I think that speaks much for the resilience of the city and the quality of the people who reside in it. So one of the key reasons for this is that we have always been very proud of our own identity. If you look at the way we have elected governments, after 1968, we have never had the possibility of a national party coming here and forming a government of its own, and even today, it doesn't look as though that is going to happen. So I think that strong sense of regional identity is one reason why, and it is not a regional identity that came up post the arrival of the Dravidian parties. This sense of regional identity has existed in this city right from the 1800s. The way we developed, the way we grew in a different fashion. So that is one. Secondly, our linguistic pride, which again comes because of the fact that we are very conscious of our regional identity, the way we have maintained it. So and this democratic sentiment, where we feel that we are part of a nation, at the same time we are an independent entity, does not start today or yesterday. The oldest inscription of a democratic setup of government is not very far from Chennai. It's in a place called Uttaramirur. And it starts from the 7th century, where they give you detailed description of how a local self-government is to be formed. So you've got Tota Varyam, Tannir Varyam, all these are there. So management of gardens, management of farms, management of water supply, and the way you have to elect the governments or the people who administer. There are rules and regulations, and the one rule that we forgot is it says that you cannot be accused of any corruption if you want to continue in public office. Later we changed it and said that you can be in public office only if you are accused of corruption. And that rule is not only for the individual, it also applies to all the family members. Half the people, today nobody can then be there in power. So Uttaramirur gives you all those details. It also tells you how you can administer your own area, how money is to be collected. So it talks of a very high level of evolution in public thought, even in the 6th and the 7th centuries. So it's very, convenient normally to say that the British founded Madras in 1639. I am not really a votary of that thought. In my view, this existed as several independent and fairly evolved villages, all of which came together under one identity called Madras with the arrival of the British. So if you look at, I've already spoken to you about Uttarameru. The other thing is that the way we developed our arts, which is a clear indication of how evolved a society can be. Temple carving, for instance, the earliest instances of rock carving are here. If you look at Mahabalipuram, if you look at Pallavaram, where there is a temple carved in a rock, and that is today a mosque. It has been converted into a mosque, and so that is there. So it all indicates that very early in life we were able to create our own forms of art. The other interesting feature as far as this temple art and architecture and all that is concerned is that we can see an evolution of how we first carved in rocks, and then we carved freestanding temples, and then we created big temples, all of which are around in this city itself. So you've got Pallavaram where there is a rock temple, Mahabalipuram where you've got rocks, then you've got freestanding temples also, then you've got plenty of temples all around the city, some of which are very, very ancient. And there was a strong bhakti evolution here as well, the Nayanmars, the Alvars coming. So over a period we appear to have developed very, very strongly with a lot of contribution towards Tamil as a language. And then comes the other great tradition, which is that of weaving cloth. And we have always a very strong community that wove, and that our cloth was sold in various places. Thiruvalluvar, the great creator of the Tirukkural, was a weaver. And he is supposed to have lived in Chennai as much as he is supposed to have lived in Madurai, as much as he is supposed to have lived in other places. But Chennai also lays claim to have been the home of Thiruvalluvar. So the Kural, if it evolved over here, it shows the way we were thinking at a very early stage in our history. But it cannot be denied that the English are the people who really come in 1639 and they put us all together. The point is, did they give us the name Madras? We don't know. But the contract that was signed between Francis Day and the local Nayak says in our town of Madraspatnam, which means the name Madras existed even before the arrival of the British, and it was a small village or a town to which Francis Day came. Sadly, the name Chennai does not appear anywhere in the original grant. Chennai, if at all it came, is a Telugu word. But it became very convenient in 1996 to say that Madras was an English name and Chennai was a Tamil name. And in effect, we are today commemorating a Telugu word by calling our city as Chennai, when the original name, which existed even when the contract was signed, was Madras. So that is a piece of history that has been forgotten in the long term. The coming of the English gives us many benefits, but those benefits have been available to every city in the country. So you cannot say that we were unique. They created telegraph, they brought the trains, they brought communication. All that is fine. But in what way were we different? So if you look at it, one of the first thing is the way we took to printing our language. So as you all know, Tamil is the oldest non-European language to be printed. It was printed by the Portuguese in the 14th and the 15th century, and they could not propagate it. But in 1706 in Tarangampadi, the Bible was translated into Tamil and it was printed. And then the printing press came to Madras. The Tamils took to printing from the 19th century in a very, very big way. And so the entire Georgetown area, if you look at the Mint Street, Govindapanayakan Street, these were all full of printing presses that were churning out Tamil books. So the tendency to read and the tendency to educate yourself becomes very high in this city. And by the close of the 19th century, early 20th century, news was being disseminated through printed material. So these were known as Kalana Puttarangal. So they cost practically nothing. They were printed on very cheap paper. So today, if there was a train accident or if there was a murder, by evening a song would be printed on it and the song books will be distributed. People will stand at street corners and sing those songs and distribute the papers. So people will then take it away and they will read it and they will get to know that such and such an event happened. So this was a method by which and by 1920-21, the freedom struggle was getting into that kind of publication. So the government was keeping a very tight watch on those books. They were very frequently apprehended, and that really results in the Tamil magazine revolution and the Tamil publication revolution. So we were very much into the reading of magazines and books long before, maybe Bengal and Maharashtra were equal in this. But certainly the rest of India was not really given to this kind of reading and this kind of attention to letters, so to speak, and to see what public events were happening all over the country and all over the world. The other evolution is the way the city supported music. So from the 17th century, we find that this is an extraordinarily musical city. It's a thriving musical city, so you have courtesans, you have musicians, and you have a very, very prominent community that supported the musicians, and that was the Arya Vaishya community. What we referred to as Komati Chettis, but referred to as Arya Vaishyas. Without them, the music world would not have survived in Madras. So these were the people who supported. Our Anna is here, Sriram, Venkatesh is there. These are all Arya Vaishyas, the people who actually gave us the music. So that music was a very big factor once again in creating public thought, bringing in a sense of unity in the community. People could come and sit and listen to performances. So this music once again was not just South Indian music. There was the British brought Western classical music in. Then there was a lot of folk music in this city. So this was so today, last year when we got this creative city tag, it was a very well-deserved recognition, but we were not working towards that recognition. This was something that we were subconsciously developing all the time, and we remain a very musical city, which is why this became one of the 3 great centers for recording in India. So if you look at Calcutta, Bombay and Madras, Bangalore was initially thought of as the recording capital, but within 1 year the recording industry had moved here. By 1905, Madras had become the recording capital, and all kinds of music was recorded here and it still continues. Today of course the recording industry is dead, but in its time this was a great recording capital. So and then theatre comes from Madurai, and then because you had a lot of industry over here, because the workers needed to be entertained every day in the evenings, so theatre also comes to this place. So when all these 3, when letters, music and theatre is there, cinema was a natural byproduct of all these things. If you want to know how music really contributed to the the progressive thought in this city, the first labor union in India was founded here in 1919, if I am not mistaken. It was called the Madras Labour Union, and 1918. And it was founded for Binny and Company, and the workers of Binny and Company used to go out for lunch every day in the afternoon, and their entertainment was to go and attend bhajanas in various bhajana mandirams that were around the Puliyantoppu area. So there was a bhajana mandiram called Venkatesha Gunamritabhivarshini Sabha, and there these workers went, and Selvarajulu Chettiar and Venkat Ramanjulu Naidu, I think these were the 2 people, they overheard a couple of workers saying that we don't get more than 5 minutes to take our lunch because our overseer will cut our salary if we don't go back in time. So they go and meet Annie Besant, and they tell her that these workers are not even being given enough time to take a break at lunchtime. What kind of a setup is this? So George Arundale and B.P. Wadia go and they form the Madras Labour Union, and that's the first strike formed by an organized union in the entire country. So if there had not been a musical sabha, where would these people have gone and discussed? If these 2 men had not overheard that conversation, what would have happened? So these are all very interesting products when you look at it. And so the union system really comes out of a musical organization in Madras. The next thing is, you see, as I said, we didn't have a natural harbour. The English they were told that we had a beautiful harbour by Francis Day when he came here in 1639. Why he wrote that lie, I have no idea. The standard story is that he had a woman in Santhome whom he didn't want to part with, so he decided that he had to get the East India Company to come down over here. That could be the reason, we have no clue. But for 150 years, the English managed without a harbour. The ships would all stop 2 miles in the sea, rafts would row, everybody would be offloaded onto the backs of coolies who were wearing only komanams. That was the only thrill the average English woman got in her whole life. And then all the goods would be loaded onto the rafts and then brought onto the shore. So this is how it went on till 1875. In 1875, the English finally decided that they had to start constructing a harbour for our city. So the harbour work begins. The harbour, when it was finally completed in 1914 or so, it was described as the greatest challenge that mankind had ever faced against nature in the whole world. Building a Madras harbour. I won't go into the details of it. Extraordinarily difficult task. And as the harbour was being built, they discovered a strange phenomenon that the sea on the southern side of the harbour was receding and on the northern side was coming into the city. It's a phenomenon known as a littoral drift, which is why we have the Marina Beach today. Prior to the construction of the harbour, we didn't have a Marina Beach. It was just a narrow strip of sand that existed. So all that is because of the construction of the harbour. Once the harbour came, the entire nature of the city changed, because suddenly people discovered that they could communicate to the outside world. Exports could be made directly from here rather than sending everything to Calcutta or being dependent on Colombo. And that changed the nature of the city. So how it changed, just to give you an example, in 1914 the harbour is ready and the First World War is declared. And people forget to switch off the harbour lights, so a German ship called Emden comes sailing in at 8:30 in the evening, by which time all of Madras is safely in bed, which is why our population really grew later. But the point is that at 8:30 the lighthouse working, everything working, ship comes, bursts a few shells on the city, the whole of the city empties in panic the next day, but the Emden is finally sunk near Australia. That's a different story. But the point is, we were the only city in the Indian Empire to be bombed in the First World War. Now, in the Second World War, we were the only city not to be bombed, which is a strange record. If you look at it, Machilipatnam fell, Visakhapatnam was bombed, Colombo was hit, Calcutta was going to be taken over by the Japanese. On the eastern side, there was no harbour except Madras. And so every good and commodity that had to be sent out and brought in for the war effort took place from here. The American soldiers came here. The Binni Mills had to expand its production 4 times in one course of 1.5 years so that it would cater for the clothing of the entire army. And the population of the city doubled during those 4 years of the Second World War, because suddenly the value of Chennai as a city was discovered. The harbour was standing, the city was safe, and business could be done. So this really marks the biggest transformation in the history of our city. That we got a harbour very late, but we made full use of it when the Second World War came. Then in the late 1940s, we have yet another. I'll go back to cinema in a moment. I still have 5 minutes? Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay. We had this automobile revolution that came here. We were always an automobile selling city. But in 1948, Simpson and Company convinced a truck operator on Waltax Road to change his petrol engine to a diesel engine. That really sets forth the diesel revolution across the whole country. And from then on, diesel engines become the major, they become used for all cargo operations. And so Simpson becomes a very big company, its holding company, Amalgamations becomes a very big company. And that becomes a force to reckon with. The TVS group moves into Madras in the 1950s. We suddenly transform ourselves into an automotive capital. And the biggest contributor to that is Ashok Leyland, because Ashok Motors, started by Raghunandan Saran. Raghunandan Saran was actually a freedom fighter. His father was running Pyarelal and Company in Delhi, dealing in automotive, and his son was interested in the freedom struggle, so he became a school teacher because he didn't want his father's business to be affected. In 1948, Jawaharlal Nehru told him, enough is enough, the freedom struggle is all done, now you should get into your family business, you start something on your own. So he said, okay, the only thing I know is cars. So I'll start assembly of cars. But the government said that we are going to allow only 3 factories to be set up. One in every port city. So Bombay will get Premier tires, Premier automobiles. Calcutta will get Hindustan Motors. You go down south and you start something over there. So he comes here, because his son was called Ashok, he calls it Ashok Motors. Then he signs a collaboration with Leyland, and that becomes, so today if you look at it, for a long time there were just 2 truck manufacturers in the whole country. One was Telco and the other was Ashok Leyland. So if you had to be an automotive component manufacturer, you had to come and set up base in Madras city. And as you know, 3 years ago, we made more cars than what Detroit did in the United States of America. So that revolution really starts with that coming of in the 1940s. The other is the medical revolution. Today we are a medical capital, and as you know, the Dubai government published a white paper 3 years ago where it said that it cannot really survive in the long run as a financial capital. It has to transform itself into a health capital. And they said that Chennai is the model to follow to transform yourself into a health capital. This is documented by the Dubai government, and they have made a close study of the way private medical care has thrived in this city with the coming of companies like Apollo and all that. But along with private medical care, we've also had a high degree of social medical care in this city. And that doesn't start yesterday or today, it starts with the setting up of the General Hospital. General Hospital has been in its location since 1775. It's really a record. And you name the disease, the General Hospital has seen it. The Stanley Medical Hospital is an internationally recognized center for the reconstruction of the hand. Because workers in all the industrial units in those areas, they put their hand into the press will design, the hand will get completely disfigured. They have to go to. So Stanley is recognized internationally as a center for reconstruction of the hand. These are all things that we just don't bother, celebrating. We just pass these records by. Then you have Jimpa not very far away, you've got CMC, Vellore. The railway hospital in Perambur for its heart surgeries. Then comes Apollo and Shankar Netralaya, which actually it should be called Shankar Netralaya because everybody is a Bengali there. But they even communicate with you in Bengali, and because I understand the language fluently, I have to go there twice a year for my checkups. I have a great day listening to all the conversation that goes on in the hospital. So these are all the institutions that make us a medical center for excellence. And then, I wanted to talk about cinema as one of the last points. Cinema is, it comes in 1931 to our city as a talking entity. Because we came from a very strong theatrical background, the way cinema we made was also very theatrical. It continues to remain very theatrical, with full of songs and people shouting at the top of their voices, because in theatre, it had no mic in old theatre. See, the mics came only in 1932, so the man at the end of the theatre had to listen to what you were saying. So everybody shouted, which is why Tamil cinema, Tamil serials, everybody shouts at the top of their voices. So that tradition has never gone away from us. But cinema to politics comes with the freedom struggle. In 1932-33, 1921-22, Satyamurthy, who was with the Congress party, he realizes that if he wants to get crowds to come and attend the freedom movement meetings, he needs theatre personalities to come. So he gets K.B. Sundarambal and S.G. Kittappa to come and attend the public meetings. And so the posters would announce that Kittappa and Sundarambal will be present, they will sing a song or two. So large crowds would come to listen to them, and after they had finished their performance, Satyamurthy will begin talking. Once Satyamurthy started, nobody could do anything because he was such a mesmeric speaker. If the crowd was restive, he would tell Sundaramba and Kittappa to sell khadi in the crowd. So people would stay back. On one occasion, they auctioned Kittappa's pen and netted 3,000 rupees in one evening in the 1920s. So by the 1930s, when cinema began to talk, lots more people began to enter the political movement. But by 44, Satyamurthy was dead. He died of being arrested and put in Amravati prison where the temperature was 47, 48 degrees. He was an asthmatic, he was diabetic, he had piles and all that, and he just died. And once he died, the Congress party was not in favor of these artists being with it. And they were at a loose end, they didn't know where to go. That is when Annadurai, who was already involved with the theatre movement in a big way, he says, you come along and join the self-respect movement, you join the Dravida Kazhagam. And that is how people like M.G. Ramachandran, S.S. Rajendran, all of them make and go over to the Dravidian movement. Now one of the last factor that I want to leave you with, and today we are in a very right-wing situation where these kind of discussions are not allowed, or even if they are allowed, you are met with a lot of opposition when you express your views. I think one of the greatest scoring factors in the history of Chennai is its social inclusivity. This is a city which fought for social inclusiveness long before such a term even existed. So in the 1920s, the first reservation policy had been enacted by the Madras government, which said 25% for Brahmins, 25% for non-Brahmins, 25% for Muslims, 25% for Christians and other communities. That is called the communal geo. And that was the first time, so long before Ambedkar even thought of it. 1920s, we had enacted reservation here. So we wanted people to come into the mainstream. Then we had Periyar's self-respect movement. Remarkable. What a revolution that was, because he was giving people the power to question blind beliefs, blind faiths, the existing caste system, and he was encouraging people to think on their own and come out and question whatever practices were going on in society. And so I think that creates a major impact, and that brings a lot more people into the mainstream. I think these were two of the, and then you had the noon meal scheme, which really begins with the Dalit movement, because Ayodhyadas Pandidar was the first man in 1904-1905 to begin a noon meal scheme for a Dalit school, because he wanted these Adi Dravida boys to come to school and eat and then get educated, otherwise they wouldn't get educated. Then that same concept is adopted by Kuruchi Rangasamy Iyengar in the Hindu Theological School in Mint Street. And then Mayor Sundar Rao Naidu gets it done in a few corporation schools. Kamaraj takes it to a much bigger level in the 1950s. By the time MGR comes to power, the number of corporation schools are so many that once he announces it, it becomes a major thing. So we've had almost 110 years today, if you look at it, of this midday meal schemes to get people into the mainstream of education. An outcome of that is the privatization of engineering colleges, which created a large group of people who could get employed in the IT industry when the IT revolution happened. So I think a lot of what we did over the years really came back to our benefit. And today, if you look at it, I have been to several other states in the country. I think we are one of the most forward states as far as equality is concerned. Today, you cannot address a person by his caste. You cannot speak derogatorily, and of course there are pockets in the state where even now the separate glass tumblers for communities and all exist. But they are pointed out, and then there is a correction that is done. If you go to various states in the north, it is just accepted. It's a part of life, that's all. You cannot question these things. I think that is what really makes for a huge difference as far as Chennai is concerned, and I think that is what will contribute to its greatness in the future as well. Thank you. I know it's not been a very structured talk, but it's very difficult putting together a history of this.
You didn't say about the bad, you said fortunate, unfortunate. What is unfortunate?
As I said, the fact that we, because of our regional identity, we also get neglected. When, nobody, I don't think anybody in Delhi even knows about what's happening in Chennai. So we are, and unless we fight for representation, it doesn't really work out most of the time. So we do get neglected, we are pushed into the background. But despite that, we've managed. So that is really the big thing.
Don't you think we should try and integrate into the central, national mainstream?
We have, in the sense that we've had political leaders who held ministerial positions and all that. But in the long term, I think in a country like India, it is far better to be aware of what is happening in your backyard than to be sitting in Delhi and thinking that you'll lord over the whole nation.
What I feel is only Tamil Nadu is really, doesn't want to be with the center.
There's nothing wrong in that. It's a point of view, right? It's a point of view. You can have a contrasting point of view.
No, don't you think it is a setback to our progress?
Not necessarily. We are still one of the topmost performing states on all public indices. Healthcare, industrial development. See, the rate of growth on all these things may have come down. That's because we've already reached a very high level. When you are at 80% and you grow to 90, you only grow by 10%. Whereas if you are at 0 and then you show a 40% next year, that's because you started from such a low base. So you look at it that way. So, I think we've managed very well by maintaining our identity and having a healthy respect for the central government and the Constitution of India being a part of it and things like that.